All right, I'm going to give away the plot to a movie. But here's the thing, this movie came out in 1999. So, if you've been thinking to yourself like, oh man, I wanted to watch that movie, well, that's on you. It came out in 1999. What are you waiting so long for? The movie is M. Night Shyamalan's classic, The Sixth Sense. We got anybody that's seen the movie? Got some hands. Great movie. The Sixth Sense is primarily about two characters. Dr. Malcolm is a child psychologist, and his life is falling apart all around him. And then the other character is a young boy named Cole, and Cole has this secret that he does not want anyone to know, and the secret is that he sees dead people. So the way that the movie opens, why is that funny? Oh, sorry, okay. Don't throw me off. You're throwing me off. So the way the movie opens is Dr. Malcolm and his wife get into their house, and one of his old patients has broken into his home, and he's having a kind of a mental breakdown. He ends up shooting Dr. Malcolm and then turning the gun on himself and committing suicide. And from that point on, it seems like Dr. Malcolm's life is just falling apart. His wife seems to be giving him the cold shoulder, ignoring him, not talking to him, and he just knows that his marriage is falling apart. He feels like when he's out in public and he's in the street or at the marketplace, he feels invisible. It's like no one sees him and no one talks to him. He's lost all of his confidence in his ability to be able to do the work that he was trained to do, which is to help children work through different issues in their lives. And he comes across this young boy, Cole, and he's determined he's going to help Cole. Because he sees Cole as an opportunity to make up for the failure that he feels like he did with this old patient who broke into his home and shot him. And so in Dr. Malcolm's mind, like working with Cole is his way to make up for those past failures. Cole is like, he's terrified of Dr. Malcolm, and he's terrified of him. You know, he's got this secret, right, that he sees dead people, and he is terrified of Dr. Malcolm, but Dr. Malcolm is persistent, and he tries to connect with him. He's desperate to connect with him. He's desperate to get into his life and figure out what's going on and try to help him, and Cole eventually shares with Dr. Malcolm his secret, that he sees dead people. And it's more than he just sees dead people. He interacts with them. They talk to him, and he is so afraid of these dead people. And so Dr. Malcolm reacts to that much the same way most of us would react to that, which is a little bit of hesitancy on believing that he actually sees dead people. But he's so desperate to be able to connect with Cole that he pretends he believes him, and he starts sharing with him, well, maybe the dead people that you see are not dangerous. Maybe these dead people need something from you, right? Maybe they're caught in this life and they need something from you for, your help so that they can then, take care of whatever it is they need to take care of in this life and then move on to whatever's next in their dead life. I don't know if that's like heaven in that movie or what, but like he convinces them like you need to listen to these dead people that are in your life. And so Cole takes this advice. He starts listening to the dead people that he sees in his life. They talk to him. He talks back. He figures out what it is that he needs to do to help him. He realizes that Dr. Malcolm is right, that they're not dangerous, that all they are looking for is someone to help them move on to the next stage of life. And so he's working with them. And eventually, Cole gets to a point where he decides to turn his attention to Dr. Malcolm and try to help Dr. Malcolm fix his marriage. And you go, wait a minute, what does a little boy know about marriage? Well, he doesn't know anything about marriage. But what he does know a lot about is dead people. And we discover that Dr. Malcolm is actually dead. And that Dr. Malcolm has actually been dead the entire movie. That he's been dead since the moment that patient shot him that broke into his home. And it's this major plot twist in the movie, and it's one of those plot twists in a movie that forces you to go back through the rest of the movie that you've been sitting through and rethink every scene. Because now that he's dead, it changes everything. Because guess what? His marriage isn't falling apart. His wife's not giving him the cold shoulder and ignoring him. His wife is grieving because he's dead. And she doesn't see him. She's not giving him the cold shoulder. She's not ignoring him. She doesn't see him because he's dead. And when he goes out into the marketplace and the streets, he feels invisible. Well, guess what? He is invisible. No one sees him. That's why he feels like everyone is just seeing straight through him, is because they are. He's dead. And Cole, every time Cole gets around him in the early scenes of the movie, and he's like terrified and has this look on his face like, I want to be anywhere else but right here with Dr. Malcolm. It's not because he's afraid to tell Dr. Malcolm his secret that he sees dead people. He's afraid of Dr. Malcolm because Dr. Malcolm is, man, you're good. You're good. And it makes you like rethink the entire movie. And every scene that happened up to that major plot twist in the movie, and you go back and you go, why didn't I see it? Why didn't I understand it? Now, some of you were really smart and caught on very early in the movie. I was not one of those people. I was one of those that when it happened, I was like, oh, what? But once we know that Malcolm has been dead the whole time, it changes the entire movie for the viewer. Okay, what does any of that have to do with parables? I don't know. I'm hoping I can make some kind of connection. Let's read the parables first, and let's see if I can make a connection and this isn't like some unnecessarily long introduction. Mathew 13. It's two parables that we're looking at. It says, the kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again. And then in his joy, he went and sold all that he had and bought that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant looking for fine pearls. And when he found one of great value, he went away and he sold everything he had and he bought it. And this is the word of the Lord for us today. And what I want to do with these parables is I want to play a what if game. What if? And we'll get to the what if in a moment. I have for so long understood these two parables to be parables about me, or to be parables about you, to be parables about us. And my interpretation of these two parables have always been that they are really about the value or the worth of the kingdom and our ability to be able to see how valuable the kingdom is and to see it's beyond any worth that we could place on it. Like, it is so immeasurably valuable, and this parable is about our ability to be able to see that. And that we are, in many cases, we are the man who finds the hidden treasure in the field. And that we are the merchant who goes looking for pearls, but then finds that pearl of all pearls. And so in that case, who's the main character in those parables? We are, right? I am, you are, we are the main characters. And if we are the main characters in these parables, and that interpretation is correct, then essentially these parables are about going all out for the kingdom, right? Being willing to go all out for the kingdom, seeing in the kingdom its worth, and being willing to sacrifice everything for the kingdom. Now, most of us are very familiar with this approach to these parables. As a matter of fact, I went back and I preached on these two parables in 2018 on this very stage. I save all my sermons, so I went back and looked to see what I said, and this is exactly how I preached those parables. And here's a quote, like an exact quote from that sermon. Here's the question that these two parables make us face. What are you willing to give up for the kingdom? What are you willing to sell for the kingdom? What are you willing to sacrifice for the kingdom? Remember, I want to play what if. What if? And here's my what if. What if we've been viewing these parables all wrong? or I should say me, I shouldn't put that on you, maybe you haven't. What if I have been viewing these parables all wrong, and what if we are not really the main characters in these parables? What if these parables are not about me, or about you, about us? And if that's true, and we are not the main characters in these parables, then might that, like the major plot twist in The Sixth Sense, might that make us go back and go, oh my goodness, I need to read these all over again. I need to go back and view these in a totally different lens now, because the plot twists totally changed everything. Might that totally rearrange our understanding of what Jesus is saying in these parables? That's my what if. And that's what I want to play with a little bit. So, you take these parables all alone, you kind of separate them from their context, you read them in a vacuum as if they exist all by themselves. It's understandable why I would read the parables in that traditional way that I just talked about, and I'm sure many of you have read them in that same way as well, right? Jesus doesn't give us an explanation of these parables. There are parables where the disciples come back and they say, okay, you got to explain that one to me. Well, he doesn't do that with this. He doesn't give an explanation, so we're kind of left to kind of think through what might these parables be about. There is a lot of talk in the New Testament about self-sacrifice. There's a lot of talk in the New Testament about self-denial. There's a lot of talk in the New Testament about being willing to give up everything, give up our riches, to give up our possessions for the sake of the kingdom. And so, in light of all that, it makes perfect sense. It's totally understandable why someone like me would read these parables and go, okay, this is about me, and about me finding the kingdom and what I'm willing to do in order to obtain that kingdom. But I don't want us to read these as though they exist in a vacuum. I don't want us to read these as though they're all by themselves, because these two parables fall within a collection of parables that Matthew gives us in Matthew 13, a bunch of parables that were told by Jesus that he felt like were important for us to read and to know about, and he put them in this collection, and they all exist together. And Olivia and I have been, as we've been working through these parables, we've been trying to remind you from the very beginning that these parables are ultimately about the mystery of the kingdom. They're about the mystery of the kingdom, but more than that, they're about the mystery of the way that God works within the kingdom. The mystery of Jesus' work within the kingdom. From the very beginning, the main character of all the parables we've been looking at has been who? It's been God. It's been Jesus. And so you go back and you look through those parables, and right, we started with the sower, and Jesus is the sower who sows seed that lands in all the different types of soil. And then Jesus is the one who plants good seed in his field, but then eventually discovers that both wheat and weeds are growing together. And Jesus is the one who tells the servants, no, don't go pull up the weeds, because you might end up pulling up both at the same time. Jesus is the one who sows the mustard seed, who plants that mustard seed, the smallest of all seeds, and he puts it in the ground, and it grows up to be this great big shrub, and then eventually a tree, and it's a tree so big that all the birds from all over come and rest in that tree and make nest in that tree. And Jesus is the woman in the parable who puts the little bit of yeast in that big pile of dough so that the yeast kind of mysteriously works its way throughout all that dough to make all that bread. Parable after parable after parable in Matthew 13, Jesus has been the main character. Jesus has been the one who's been doing the work. All of these parables have been about him and his relationship to the kingdom. So why then, all of a sudden, when it comes to these two parables in Matthew 13, do we all of a sudden make ourselves the main character? Why then, after all these parables, it's all about God and His work in the kingdom and the way that He works in the kingdom, why all of a sudden do we get to these two parables and go, oh, wait a minute, this one isn't about Jesus in the kingdom, now it's about me in the kingdom? And so my what if is, what if these are not parables about us and what we should be willing to do for the kingdom? But what if these parables are still very much about Jesus and His relationship to the kingdom? What if these parables are really about what Jesus is willing to do for the kingdom? And if that's the case, is it possible that maybe I'll just put this on me, is it possible that I, just like Malcolm in The Sixth Sense, have been viewing it wrong the entire time? And that once I get that major plot twist, it forces me to go back and reread everything and see it all through a new lens. What if? What if? So you see, both parables are about the lengths that one will go in order to purchase the kingdom. And right off the bat, we already encounter a theological conundrum with the traditional interpretation. And that theological conundrum is this: is there anything that we can do to purchase the kingdom? Do we buy the kingdom? No, there's nothing that we can do to purchase the kingdom. There's nothing that we can do to buy it. But who does purchase the kingdom? Who does buy the kingdom? Jesus. Think about all these passages. There's two in 1 Corinthians. One's in 1 Corinthians 6. Another one's in 1 Corinthians 7. Paul says exactly the same thing in both chapters. He says, you have been purchased by price. You have been bought. And then over in Acts 20 and verse 28, Paul tells the elders in Ephesus to look after the flock. And he says this: look after the flock, look after the church, which God bought with a price. And then over in Revelation chapter 5 and verse 9, we're told that Jesus purchased for God persons from every tribe, from every language, and from every people and every nation. Church, we are not the ones who buy the kingdom. There's nothing we can do to purchase the kingdom. There's nothing that we can do to buy it. And so in our parables, not only do these people in the parables purchase the kingdom, not only do they purchase the hidden treasure or purchase this pearl of all pearls, but they sold everything that they had in order to be able to purchase those things. They gave up everything. And you stop and you go, wait a minute. In the gospel story, who makes the ultimate sacrifice and gives up everything? Jesus. Right? God gives it all up. Jesus gives it all up. He gives it all up for the kingdom. He gives it all up for us. If you go back and you look at those passages I referenced in Corinthians and Acts and Revelation, all those places that talk about how we have been bought, we've been purchased, it all says that we've been bought, we've been purchased by His blood. He gave it up. He gave up everything so that He could purchase us. There's this great Christ hymn that we love so much in Philippians chapter 2 that starts off with this idea that Jesus did not consider equality with God something that He should grasp onto or hang onto or use to His advantage, but rather He did what? Rather He emptied Himself, we're told in that Christ hymn. He gave up everything for us. And so again, I ask, what if these parables that we're looking at today, what if these parables are not about us and the kingdom? What if we are not the main characters in these parables? How might we view these parables if midway through the movie we get this major plot twist like Malcolm and we realize Jesus is actually the main character in these parables. Jesus is actually the one who finds the hidden treasure in the field and then goes and sells everything he has so that he can buy it. And Jesus is actually the merchant, not us. Jesus is actually the merchant who goes out looking for pearls and comes upon the pearl of all pearls, and he goes and he gives up everything else, including all of his other pearls, so that he can buy this one pearl. What if? And here's the other plot twist for us. And what if, in the end, we realize that if Jesus is the one who finds the hidden treasure, we are actually the hidden treasure that he finds? What if we are not the merchant who looks for the pearl, but Jesus is, and we are the pearl of all pearls that Jesus finds? And if that is the case, and that's really what these parables are about, then ultimately these parables are really about the way Jesus sees you. And these parables are ultimately about the lengths to which Jesus will go in order to have you in his life. That you, church, listen to me, that you are of immeasurable worth and value in Jesus' eyes. That you are the hidden treasure, that you are the pearl of all pearls, and that Jesus, the farmer in the field, the merchant looking for the pearls, he gives it all up so that he can purchase you. Because to him, you are of immeasurable worth. For you, he gave it all up. For you, he sacrificed everything. For you, he shed his own blood. What if, church? That's really what these parables are about. It's about your value in God's eyes. Let's think about that. Let's dwell on that, meditate on that as we stand together and sing.